All right, good day to you. Yes, today is what we call a two video day. I'm recording two videos for YouTube. I did the one about Israel, and I knew that was going to be controversial, and I try not to do things that are really controversial like that, but I thought it was prudent, it was relevant, and it went with what we're talking about here in church right now. But I thought it'd be good to couple that with a fun video, kind of. And I say kind of because I am responding to an issues etc. episode. Um, on issues etc. recently, they did an interview with Pastor Ted Giese. Ted Giese is a pastor at Mount Olive Lutheran Church in Regina, Saskatchewan. Understand, I very much a supporter of issues etc. I think so much of their content is so valuable. I encourage literally any of you to watch their stuff. You could get so much knowledge, you get so much growth in your faith listening to the variety of topics they cover. I very, very much encourage everybody that's watching this to listen to them, subscribe to them, and everything. Um, but Ted Giese every now and then is brought on and he does movie reviews, and some of his reviews I like, some of them I don't. I am kind of indifferent or mixed. But this was a case where I just could not agree with it at all. Um, he was very, in his interview, he is very fixated upon Tom Cruise's church connection to the Church of Scientology. That he's a Scientologist. And trying to see all the ways that Scientology is in the movie. I and kind of made he talked about the movie being this really really bad movie. Called and compared it to Battlefield Earth. And if anybody knows Battlefield Earth, is one of the worst. It's one of the worst movies ever made. Um, and I thought that I flat out disagree with everything. So I saw the movie about 2 weeks ago, and I enjoyed the movie. I mean, it was not as good as Dead Reckoning, which was the previous film. So it was originally Dead Reckoning Part One, and then this was going to be Dead Reckoning Part Two, but they changed it to the Final Reckoning. I wouldn't be surprised that it has something to do with the box office numbers. Ted Giese does bring that up in his interview that the poor box office numbers of Dead Reckoning, but the reason why it had bad box office numbers, I don't think he understood the reason. So I don't have the same repertoire as Ted Giese does. I don't have like a degree in art, fine art, or whatever. I did take a philosophy and film class at Concordia University, Wisconsin. But I did work at a movie theater for like 12 years, so I'm very familiar with the industry. I know what movies have been popular, which movies have not. I could tell you why a movie. I could probably give you a pretty good idea why movies succeed or fail, and when they're going to succeed and when they're going to fail. Because I've worked through so many big movies through the years, especially the summer films. And I can tell you why Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning failed box office wise. It didn't fail critically. It actually was very well responded to critically, and I thought the movie was awesome. I thought it was an amazing movie, and so I was really looking forward to this Final Reckoning, given how good the first one was. Like, ooh, I hope they stick the landing and have a really good movie. It took 2 years to come out. Um, it's not as bad as Across the Spider Verse, but in terms of delay, but this is quite a bit of one. But anyways, what actually happened was kind of a case of bad luck. And I mean, in terms of its release date, the release date is what hurt it. So when it came out, there was already the movie. Indiana Jones was out at that time. The most recent one, I can't think of the name of it. The time one, drawing a blank. But anyways, that one had just came out, so that was already big. But the biggest thing that hurt it was the surprise success of Sound of Freedom. That I would say is one of the biggest things that hurt it because it came out with like only 3 or 4 days beforehand, and the talk of cinema and everything was completely drowned out by Sound of Freedom. And Mission Impossible wasn't really noticed. And by the time the Sound of Freedom popularity began to lift, the attention shifted to Barbieheimer. Remember that? You may remember that weekend when Oppenheimer and Barbie came out the same weekend. Yeah, that was like 10 days later or something like that. And so basically got sandwiched between that and it killed its box office. It was just a really bad release date. And so that's why it didn't do well. And that's why they probably, they made sure to come up with the last movie because, they knew it was a good movie. I mean, the critics were saying this is a good movie. People should give it a try. For whatever reason, they're not. The Mission Impossible movies have been good, really. For most of its run, it was a pretty good franchise. But so the other thing that he brings up is, so going back to that, so that's kind of what happens, and I'm wondering if that's not why they went to Final Reckoning, and also a way to let you know that this is the last one with Tom Cruise. And I don't know if people realize how impressive this is as a run. The first movie came out in 1996. Having a movie last, a single actor play a single character for just short of 30 years, especially an action character, is remarkable. All right. Hugh Jackman has been doing Wolverine for 25 years. All right. But he's got 30 years almost playing the same character. I mean, James Bond is always changing actors. Same thing with Batman, but yeah, this is kind of impressive. Teddy Giese also in his interview takes issue with the whole only you could save him, if he's kind of crossing that with Scientology and everything. And I'm like, no, it's a movie trope. That's what's going on. It's a movie trope, and it's very common in films, especially. If you ever watch James Bond, you have to remember James Bond. So James Bond was kind of picking steam back up with Pierce Brosnan in the 90s, back when the Tom Cruise Mission Impossible started. And both of these movies were going right along. And James Bond movies always had that same theme too. Like James, Bond 007, you're the only one that can save this. You're the only one that can stop this thing. That's how it goes. They say that to the Avengers. They say that to Batman. They say that to Superman. That's what happens in action and superhero movies. That's not Scientology. That's movies. Especially when you're talking about an action character who has saved the day for 30 years. Of course they're going to talk like that. I don't know why it's a surprise. That's what they do in movies. It is so old. It goes back to, I don't know how far back it goes, to make a big deal out of it. I'm sorry to get heated or passionate about it, but it just drove me nuts listening to a lot of these things, because these are things that if you watch movies, these things happen. The whole thing about Scientology, I'm going to let you in on a secret. So he brought up a lot of the names in the movie are Christian names and things like that. And I can tell you probably the biggest reason for that is the writer. Quick Google search. The writer and director of the film went to a Christian school growing up. And so he'd be very familiar with it. That's a simple way to explain that. But here's the thing is, when it comes to the Scientology thing, if it's there, it's very covert. It's not in your face. And there's a reason to that. So going back to my experience working in a movie theater, I was at work at a movie theater when Mission Impossible 3 came out. Now, Mission Impossible 2 was actually a pretty good box office success. And kind of the thought was as good as Mission Impossible did. So as good as Mission Impossible did, so here you can see it right here. I have it posted. Opening box office was $57 million. This was in 2000, so $57 million opening weekend in 2000. That's a big deal. That's a good opening. And man, I didn't realize. Man, May 24th, 2000. Crazy. Anyways, the overall there's a $125 million budget, but here you go. The worldwide, $546 million. Domestic, $215 million. $215 million domestic box office in 2000. That is a very successful movie. All right, in the year 2000. If you adjust it for inflation, I want to see here. I can't find it. But if you adjust it for inflation, I imagine it'd be even better than that. But that's that's a good box office break-in. So the thought was that Mission Impossible 3 was going to be this huge success. Well, I'm going to pull this up for you. I'm going to show you it wasn't as much. So keep in mind this made $215 million in 2000. 6 years later, this comes out. Look at what it made. $134 million in 2006 numbers. And so this is after we've had like the Lord of the Rings movies. We've had had the full prequel trilogy of Star Wars. So at this point, you're starting to have more and more movies pushing that $300 million mark. And here, it didn't even make budget in terms of the domestic. Worldwide, it got to just short of 400, but really underimproved. What happened? And if you're thinking, oh, maybe it must be not as good of a movie, okay, let's look at that. So here you go. Mission Impossible 2, 57%. Audience score, 42%. So it's not even well reviewed. Compare this with Mission Impossible 3, 69%. Audience score, 73% on Rotten Tomato. And by the way, if you go to IMDb, it's going to reflect the same thing. Mission Impossible 2 is the only movie in the Mission Impossible franchise to get a Rotten score. But it did huge at the box office. Why did Mission Impossible 3 fail? While I worked at the movie theater, I could tell you in 2006, I was working at the movie theater when this movie came out. And yes, it failed box office-wise. And I could tell you why. His Scientology. This is when his Scientology became very well known in the media. And it was shortly after the whole I love Katie Holmes thing on Oprah. It killed the movie. It almost killed the franchise. If it weren't for let's see here, Mission Impossible 4, which I'm going to go to, let's see here. I can't remember which one was Mission Impossible 4. So Mission Impossible 4, there you go. Ghost Protocol. If they had not brought in Simon Pegg and brought in a new Brad Bird as a director, this franchise would be dead. But that saved it. And it's to some degree, Tom Cruise's career began to revitalize because of Tropic Thunder, actually, was the movie that really started to revitalize his career. But the thing is with the Mission Impossible films, they would not want to go into that Scientology thing, or if they're going to have it there, it's going to be very not out in the front for you because it already killed one of their films, and they don't want that to happen again. All right, it almost killed Tom Cruise's career because of what he was doing. John Travolta's done some of this stuff, but Tom Cruise is a little more careful. Has had to be a little bit more careful in recent years. Why does he do his own stunts? I don't know. Is that Scientology? I don't know. It could be his ego. Who knows? Jackie Chan does his own stunts too, but he's not a Scientologist, so I don't know why we make that a big deal. So I'm going to say he also brought. There's another thing that got brought up in the review. He was talking about this scene where he thinks it's kind of like a resurrection. And I'll admit, for a moment, I thought he died, but I shouldn't have, because everything that happened in that scene, they told you a little bit ago, that a little bit earlier, that would happen. That there's going to be this point where he floats up to the top or whatever. They told you exactly. They told you the exact circumstance that's going to happen, like 20 minutes earlier. I mean, we shouldn't have been as surprised. I was, but admittedly, I was surprised, but I shouldn't have been, because they just told you. They told you who was going to die. They said his heart was slow because of the cold water, but they didn't say he was going to die. It was right there, you know. Was it a ridiculous scene? I don't know. I'll have to leave that to the medical experts. Sometimes, I don't want to say something and say, "Oh, that was stupid," and then somebody comes and says, "No, this could actually happen," or whatever. I don't want to say that, because sometimes the body could. It reminds me of there's an episode of Scrubs, and it's an episode where three patients all receive organs from somebody who's infected by rabies. And I've heard a number of doctors come back and say, "Oh, no hospital would ever do that." And they're acting all smart and saying, "We all know and these are coming from actual medical doctors." And many people came back and said, "No, it actually did happen. It is actually based on a real case." Because that's actually how Scrubs worked. Is all of the medical situations in that show were based on real medical cases. It's so that's an example why. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to pretend to know the fullness of what happened in there, what's possible. I'll leave that to someone else to decide that. Is it ridiculous? Maybe, maybe not. So if I were to talk about Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, I would not get so caught up in the Scientology thing that I would not recognize the bigger issue going on there. The whole issue, the way the movie starts, it's carrying over from the previous movie, is that AI is inciting conflict amongst nations and amongst people. And I honestly thought that would be the thing that I would focus on if I'm going to talk about this movie, and that's what I'm going to do here in the last few minutes. I don't want to get too much longer on this video, and I'm sorry to rag on this, because I don't have anything against Pastor Gacy personally or anything. I haven't met him, and I appreciate what he does and the work he does, but I just felt like he was very heavy-handed in that interview, and I just disagreed with so much of what he said. The only thing I agreed with was I liked the Offerman scene where he does not fall into the stereotypical military guy. I agree with that one. So that was one thing I agreed with him on. But I was really surprised he did not talk about at all this. Because that's the central issue. That if he missed. It's basically the case of I don't know, you focus so much on the trees, you didn't notice the forest, and the central real issues, it is relevant. We know that social media has been used to manipulate our elections. We know how the media is getting, our social media is getting us angrier and angry with each other. And this is on account of the algorithms, which, by the way, algorithms is a form of AI. I mean, AI, the idea of our AI, artificial intelligence, going wonky and start doing things it shouldn't because of some glitch in the system, I would not be surprised. I mean, anybody ever work with Microsoft Word and get really frustrated when it starts going wonky? Why would we be surprised if AI, which is created by failed human beings like us, that it wouldn't have something go wrong with it? I believe what was actually the actual point of the movie was relevant. And I'm surprised that that never got even brought up. Fortunately, Issues Etc. is having a lot of episodes, and I guess maybe they're not wanting to double down on the topic they're talking about in other segments. But I mean, that was the obvious thing that was being talked about. But couldn't help but talk about the Scientology. Is Scientology an issue? Yes. Do we need to be concerned with that as Christians? Yes, because it's a false religion. Yes. But is that the central topic of that film? No. And the fact that you made it about that, I don't know how that happened. It's almost like you went into the movie planning to hate it. And you missed the message. So I do believe I don't think this was a perfect movie. And I could go with the whole thing with the ice scene. Was that ridiculous? But face it. We watch movies, we see a lot of ridiculous things, all right? If you've ever watched one of the greatest scenes in the original Superman film was Superman catching Lois. As Sheldon Cooper pointed out, that scientifically couldn't happen. Not the flying part, but if he caught her, she'd split in half or whatever. She'd probably die on impact. Okay? So, I mean, that wasn't realistic, but I don't hear anybody complaining about, this movie's terrible because of that. Nobody's doing that. Every movie has a little bit of a suspension of disbelief, right? Why coming down so hard on this one? I thought it had good action scenes. I thought the whole scene in the submarine was a great scene. I thought it was tense. And I thought it's really great because it's one of those scenes where it's tense and there's no one shooting, there's no fighting, but going through that water, trying to figure out how to get in, how to get out, with those torpedoes jumbling around, and meanwhile the submarine is rolling around in the soil. I mean, on the ground, the bottom of the ocean. That's I like that intense scene. The whole scene, to launch a nuke, don't launch a nuke. That whole scene is tense. That was good tension. There's a lot of good tension moments in the movie, and I enjoyed it. And by the way, you're looking at this. I mean, Track.tv. So this is I gave it a 7, but the average review is 74%. Rotten Tomatoes has it at 80%. So with the audience score 88%. So it doesn't look like I'm alone in thinking this is a good movie. And to compare it to Battlefield Earth, let's see what Battlefield Earth did. All right, 2000. Interesting. Came out the same year as Mission Impossible 2. Yeah, Battlefield Earth has 3%. Audience score 13%. All right. Let's go to. There you go. 37%. Average review on here. On Tracked. So, I mean, I don't. Make that comparison. I'm like, seriously? Seriously? I don't know what was the reason to go that hard on that review of that film. I think the review that was given was just unfair, and it was it missed a great conversation. I believe movies are great opportunities for real conversations about issues in our world, and to focus so hardly on the possible details of Scientology and completely ignore the actual plot, which is ultimately about an AI going haywire in the midst of a culture that's dealing with trying to figure out how do we live in a world of AI, and you completely ignore that. I honestly consider that an irresponsible review. And I know, none of us are perfect. We all make our mistakes, and I'm not going to hold a grudge or anything, but and I know you do other stuff, and I'm sure they do well. And you've done other reviews I thought were pretty good, and you brought out stuff that I might not have seen. But yeah, so there you go. I know I'm at 25 minutes. I didn't plan to go this late long. Um, so Mission Possible, Final Reckoning. Is it worth seeing? Yeah, I'd say eventually I could get back on here on the screen. But yeah, I think it's worth seeing. I think it's fun. It's what you call a popcorn and pop movie, but again, it does raise the questions. What is the internet doing? What is the media doing? Social media, all these things. What is it doing in the way that we perceive people? And the whole thing of like masking, like making it look like people said things that they didn't. That's happening right. That's happening right now. So it's very relevant, and it's very worth talking about. So blessings. I'm sorry if this was very. And I feel bad about going after a review, and I don't want to do that. This is not my intent, but I feel like that was one that needed to be responded to because it's a Lutheran pastor. I'm a Lutheran pastor. We're brothers in Christ. We're brothers in the ministry, but I feel like in that case, I feel like it's one of those things I kind of wanted to respond and give a different viewpoint on this. So, anyways, blessings in Jesus' name, amen.